The sun had barely risen over old Lekora district, yet the sound of hammering already echoed from the small repair shed beside a weather-beaten bungalow. Kenneth Okoro wiped the sweat from his forehead and continued fixing a broken generator. His palms were calloused, his shirt damp with labor, but his spirit quietly resilient. Inside the bungalow, his wife Linda sat by the window, staring out at the narrow, dusty road. Her eyes lingered on the passing luxury cars that glided by, their tinted windows reflecting lives she believed should have been hers. "Ken," she said sharply, her tone tired and edged with bitterness, "don't you ever get tired of living like this? Look at's no good furniture, no car, no comfort." Ken looked up from his workbench, wiping his hands on an old rag. "Linda, I'm doing all I can. What we lack in money, we have in peace. Give it time." But Linda wasn't listening anymore. Her gaze drifted toward the mansion at the far end of the road. Chief Ugo Madu's residence, with its marble fence and armed guards. Her brother lived there. Proof that wealth and status could be achieved if one was willing to reach for it. That evening, Ken returned home late, exhausted but hopeful. He had earned just enough for food and his son's school uniform. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Linda," he called, stepping into the dimly lit room. The air was still. A folded note lay on the table beside a half-eaten meal. Ken's trembling fingers unfolded it. "I can't live this way anymore. I'm leaving with someone who can give me the life I deserve. Don't look for me." He stared at the words until they blurred. In the corner of the room, their 5-year-old son, Desmond, clutched a small wooden toy, eyes wide with confusion. "Papa, where's Mama going?" Ken sank to his knees, pulling his boy close, fighting back tears. She went away for a while, my son, but I'm here. I'll always be here." Outside, thunder rolled as rain began to fall, washing the dust off the cracked windows. Inside that humble house, a man's heart broke quietly, but his spirit refused to die. He whispered into the storm, "Lord, if all I have is this boy, then I will give him everything I am." And in that vow, a seed of destiny was planted, one that would grow into a test far greater than any man could imagine. Years passed, like the quiet ticking of a wall clock in the Okoro home. Desmond, now 10, was the laughter that filled the empty spaces his mother left behind. Each morning before school, he'd stand by the doorway watching his father patch an old bicycle or fix a leaking tap for neighbors who often paid him in gratitude rather than cash. Their small home smelled of engine oil, soap, and hope, the scent of a man who refused to give up. Ken's hands were never clean, but his heart was. He taught Desmond not only arithmetic and scripture, but dignity, that hard work was a crown no man could steal. "Papa," Desmond asked one night as they shared roasted yam and palm oil under the glow of a kerosene lantern, "do I have a mother?" The question struck like lightning. Ken's hand paused midair, the flicker of the lantern reflecting in his eyes. He had dreaded this day. He sighed, his voice breaking slightly. "You do, my son, but she left a long time ago. She wanted a life we couldn't afford." Desmond stared silently at the floor, then looked up with tears glistening. "Did she leave because of me?" Ken quickly gathered him into his arms. "No, my boy, never because of you. Some people lose sight of love when gold shines too bright. But you, Desmond, you are my gold." The boy's small arms wrapped tightly around his father's neck. "I'll never leave you, Papa. I'll make you proud one day." Ken smiled faintly. You already have, my son. But promise me this when you have more than I ever did. Never forget the people who have less. That night, Desmond lay in bed, listening to his father whisper prayers through the thin wall, words woven with gratitude and pain. Lord, make my son greater than me, but kinder than those who left us. Outside, the moonlight rested gently on the rusted roof, blessing the home of a man whose wealth lay not in riches, but in resilience. In that humble room, faith was teaching its quiet lesson. Poverty doesn't define you. Character does. And unknown to them both, the vow made in tears that night would echo years later inside a mansion of marble and lies. 15 years later, the Lekora skyline had changed. Glass towers now shimmered where old bungalows once stood, and traffic lights blinked where dust roads had slept. In one of those towers, the headquarters of D-Connect Innovations, stood Desmond Okoro, a man whose name had become a symbol of brilliance and determination. He was only 30, yet his calm confidence and humble smile set him apart from the arrogant millionaires who filled Lekora's elite circles. Reporters called him the man who rose from the slums to the skyline. But those who truly knew him, those who remembered his father's quiet sacrifices, knew better. Desmond had not risen above his roots. He had risen through them. Every morning, he still called his father before leaving for work. "Papa, how's the house?" And Ken would chuckle from the other end, his voice gentle. "Still standing, my son, just like your old man." Their bond was unshakable. Ken had refused to move into his son's mansion at Hillcrest Estate. "I built my piece here," he said. "I'll visit, but I belong where humility lives." But as Desmond's influence grew, so did the attention, and not all of it pure. At gala events and conferences, women gravitated toward him, drawn not by his heart, but by his wealth. They flattered, they smiled, they promised forever. Yet something in their eyes reminded Ken of Linda-polished greed, hiding behind painted lashes. "Papa," Desmond once joked, "you don't trust any woman who wears heels higher than her heart." Ken smiled softly. "I trust character, son, and character never needs heels." That night, and as Desmond stared at the Lekora skyline from his penthouse window, he thought about his father's words. He wanted love, but the kind that didn't fade when money vanished. Across town, fate was quietly moving pieces. A woman named Clara Williams, confident, beautiful, and ambitious, had just told her friend over coffee, "Desmond Okoro? That's the kind of man I deserve." And though destiny had given Desmond every success his father prayed for, it was about to test whether he had inherited something far more valuable, his father's discernment. The Hillcrest Grand Ballroom shimmered with gold chandeliers and crystal laughter that night. Desmond stood among the city's elite, polite smile in place, yet his mind half elsewhere. It was there between polished glass and champagne flutes that Clara Williams first appeared. She moved like music, every gesture deliberate, every smile perfectly timed. Her silver gown glowed against her caramel skin, her perfume trailing like promise. "Mr. Okoro," she greeted, voice smooth as velvet. "I've heard so much about you." Desmond chuckled. "Good things, I hope." "Only that you're the most eligible bachelor in Lekora," she teased, her eyes glinting. That night marked the beginning of what the papers soon called Lekora's power romance. Clara's brand, Clara W. Couture, partnered with Desmond's company for a tech fashion showcase. Cameras captured every smile, every tender glance, every diamond she wore that whispered success. But miles away in old Lekora, Ken Okoro sat in his modest sitting room watching their photo appear on a news broadcast. The screen's glow painted his face with both pride and unease. "She's beautiful," murmured his neighbor, Mama Eno. "Your son found a queen." Ken smiled faintly, but his heart felt heavy. "Beauty is a crown," he replied, "but not every crown fits the head that wears it." A week later, Desmond brought Clara home for dinner. She arrived in a black SUV, stepping into the small compound, like one inspecting a relic. "So this is where you grew up?" she asked, her manicured fingers brushing against a cracked wall. Ken greeted her warmly, offering her a seat and a meal of yam porridge. She barely touched it. "I'm not used to this kind of food," she said lightly, unaware of the shadow that crossed Ken's eyes. Later, as she and Desmond drove off, Ken stood by the gate long after their car disappeared. He whispered into the night, "Lord, my son has climbed high, but please don't let him fall for someone who looks down." That evening, Desmond called, voice bright. "Papa, what do you think of Clara?" Ken hesitated before answering. "She's lovely, my son. But remember, the most dangerous storm is the one that begins with calm skies." Desmond laughed softly, brushing off the words, unaware that his father's warning wasn't just wisdom, it was prophecy. The rain came down hard that Friday evening in Lekora Central Market, turning puddles into mirrors and the narrow alleys into rivers of mud. Ken Okoro walked briskly beneath a torn umbrella, clutching a paper bag of groceries. His joints ached, but his spirit, that quiet flame of purpose, burned steady as ever. He was humming an old Igbo hymn when three shadowy figures stepped out from between the stalls. "Old man," one of them barked, "drop the bag." Ken froze. "Please," he said gently, "I have nothing worth stealing." But they moved closer, faces hidden by hoods, their voices thick with menace. One grabbed him roughly, the bag falling, spilling rice and tomatoes into the water. "Let him go!" a woman's voice rang out. They turned, startled by the firmness in her tone. She was small, drenched from the rain, yet her posture was fierce. Anita Bassey, 26, stood clutching her phone like a weapon. "I've called the police," she lied boldly, "and if you don't leave now, you'll regret it." The men hesitated, muttered curses, and vanished into the storm. Ken exhaled shakily, clutching his chest. "My child, you just saved an old man." Anita smiled, breathless but steady. "No, sir, I just did what's right. Are you okay?" He nodded. Yes, God bless you. I live nearby." "I'll walk with you," she said softly, adjusting her soaked blouse against the wind. The two walked side by side through the dimly lit streets, their shoes splashing through puddles. She held the broken umbrella above his head, not hers. When they reached his gate, Ken turned to her with gratitude shining in his eyes. "What's your name, my dear?" "Anita," she replied with a modest smile. "Anita Bassey." Ken's heart warmed. "May your kindness find you again someday, Anita Bassey." That night, as he dried his clothes by the fire, Ken couldn't stop thinking of her courage. A stranger had done for him what his own son's fiancé never would risk: comfort for compassion. The next morning, his neighbor, Mama Eno, mentioned casually, "Ah, that Anita? She works for your son's company, D-Connect Innovations, always early, always helping people." Ken froze mid-sip of his tea. Fate, it seemed, had woven a small golden thread through the dark cloth of his worry. He looked toward the dawn light seeping through his window and whispered, Lord, perhaps the answer to my prayers already walks in my son's office. And in that moment, a new chapter of destiny began, quiet, humble, and soaked in rain. The following weekend, Ken Okoro sat across from his son in the spacious dining room of Hillcrest Estate. The chandelier's glow made the silverware sparkle, but Ken's eyes weren't on the decor, they were on Desmond, whose face shone with the confidence of a man who had conquered the world, yet whose heart, Ken feared, still lacked discernment. Desmond spoke animatedly. "Papa, the wedding planner says Clara wants a destination ceremony. Santorini, maybe Dubai. I told her we could just do Lekora, but she said it's too ordinary." Ken smiled faintly, stirring his tea. "And what do you want, my son?" Desmond hesitated. "I just want her to be happy." Ken nodded slowly. "Happiness built on show, Desmond. Fades faster than fireworks." His son chuckled, trying to lighten the moment. "Papa, you always find a proverb to ruin romance." But Ken didn't laugh. "Romance is not ruined by wisdom, only protected by it." He leaned forward. "Tell me about this girl, Anita, the one who works for you." Desmond blinked. "Anita? My secretary?" "Yes," Ken replied. "She's the one who saved me from being robbed last week." Desmond's jaw dropped. "She did what?" Ken recounted the story, the rain, the courage, the humility. As he spoke, Desmond's expression shifted from surprise to admiration. "That's unbelievable. She never mentioned it." Ken smiled knowingly. True kindness doesn't advertise itself. Desmond leaned back. "Anita is amazing, Papa. She's hardworking, calm, respectful. I trust her more than anyone at the company." Then, with a sheepish grin, he added, "But she's not really my type." Ken raised an eyebrow. "Not your type?" "I mean, she's simple," Desmond explained almost apologetically. "I respect her, but I'm more drawn to women like Clara, elegant, sophisticated." Ken sighed deeply, his fingers tracing the rim of his teacup. "My son, a woman's worth is not measured by her gloss, but by her grace. Sophistication can be worn like perfume, sweet today, gone tomorrow. But humility, Desmond, humility lingers." Desmond smiled patiently, the way young men do when they think wisdom belongs to another century. "Don't worry, Papa. You'll love Clara once you know her better." Ken's gaze softened, but his words carried quiet weight. "I hope you're right, my son, but I've learned not all that glitters is gold, and sometimes what looks simple is heaven in disguise." That night, as Desmond left for a dinner date with Clara, Ken sat by the window of the guest room. The Lekora skyline twinkled like scattered diamonds beyond the hills, but all he saw was shadows long, shifting, and waiting for the test that destiny was already preparing. The days that followed felt uneasy in Hillcrest Estate. Ken Okoro couldn't shake the silent tug in his spirit, the same quiet warning that had once whispered about Linda before she left. This time, it came with Clara's name written all over it. He watched her more closely during his visits. The way she looked past the maids as though they were furniture. How her laughter grew loudest when expensive gifts were mentioned. And how she barely noticed when Desmond spoke of anything deeper than glamour. Ken prayed for peace, but conviction came instead. That night, as the evening rain pattered against the mansion's tall windows, he called Desmond into the study. "Son," Ken began softly, "there's something I must do, something. You won't understand now, but will one day thank me for." Desmond frowned. "Papa, what is it?" Ken looked him squarely in the eye. Let me work here in your mansion, not as your father, but as your security guard. Desmond blinked. You can't be serious. I am, Ken replied firmly. I want to see how your fiancé treats those she believes are beneath her. Love, my son, is not proven in grand gestures, but in small kindnesses. The way a woman treats a cleaner today is how she'll treat her husband when the applause fades. Desmond leaned back, half amused, half worried. Papa, Clara's not like that. She's just direct. Ken smiled faintly. Then the test will only prove her worth. After a long pause, Desmond exhaled. Fine, I'll go along with it, but only to make you happy. And so, the next morning, Mr. Sam, the new elderly security guard, reported for duty at Hillcrest Estate. Dressed in a simple uniform, cap pulled low, he bowed respectfully as Clara Williams stepped out of her sleek SUV. Good morning, ma'am, Ken greeted quietly. She glanced at him briefly, adjusting her sunglasses. Just open the gate quickly next time, she said coldly, stepping past him without a smile. Ken nodded humbly, though his heart tightened. The first test day had already begun. Days passed, and Clara's impatience grew obvious. She barked orders, ignored greetings, and once, when he accidentally dropped a parcel, she hissed, "You old man, can't you do anything right?" Each insult was a dagger not for his pride, but for his son's innocence. Yet Ken endured, praying that truth would reveal itself in time. That evening, as he sat alone in the small security booth, Desmond passed by and whispered, "Papa, how's the test going?" Ken smiled faintly, eyes still watching the mansion lights. "The truth," he said quietly, "is starting to speak." Outside, thunder rolled across the Lekora skyline, not of storm, but of revelation drawing near. The following week, the sun over Hillcrest Estate burned with an almost ironic brightness, as if mocking the chill that had settled inside its marble walls. Clara's mask of sophistication had begun to slip. She now treated Mr. Sam, the old security guard, as though he were invisible. If she saw him sweeping, she would complain that he was too slow. If he stood at attention, she'd accuse him of staring. "Open the gate faster next time," she snapped one morning from her car window. "You move like time owes you money." Ken simply bowed. "Yes, ma'am." Each word of humility cost him something, but his purpose held him steady. That same afternoon, Anita Bassey arrived at the mansion with a file Desmond had left at the office. The security booth door opened, and she gasped in pleasant surprise. "You," she said, "the man from the market?" Ken smiled, warmth breaking through his weary face. "Yes, my dear. Still working. Still thankful." But before Anita could respond, Clara's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Sam!" she barked. "Why are you chatting with visitors? Get back to your post." Anita froze, watching the woman's expression, contemptuous, sharp, dripping with authority that had no grace. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she began. "I just needed to deliver a file to Mr. Okoro." Clara turned her gaze on Anita, eyes narrowing. "You work for him?" "Yes, ma'am. His secretary." Clara's lips curved in a smirk. "Then act like one. Not every man needs rescuing from you, Miss Secretary. This one has a job. Let him do it." The air thickened. Even the guards nearby looked away, but Anita, small yet steady, stood her ground. "With respect, ma'am," she said, her voice calm but firm. "A person's value isn't decided by their job or uniform. Even the lowest gate can guard the greatest treasure." Clara's cheeks flushed red with anger. "You're overstepping." "Maybe," Anita replied, But kindness is never out of place. Silence fell. Clara turned sharply and stormed inside, her heels clicking like thunder. Ken stood speechless, humbled, proud, moved. Anita's courage had done what his disguise never could. It exposed true nobility without effort. "Thank you, my child," he whispered. "The world needs more hearts like yours." Anita smiled softly. "The world needs more fathers like you, sir." That night, as Ken sat alone in the booth, the mansion light shimmered through his tears. He had seen something rare, the same gentle strength he once saw in himself, reflected in a woman of quiet fire. He realized then, the test wasn't just revealing Clara's heart, it was revealing Anita's too. And somewhere deep in his spirit, Ken knew that destiny was turning its wheel toward truth, justice, and redemption. Night fell heavy over Hillcrest Estate, the kind of stillness that carried warnings. In the security booth, Ken Okoro, still disguised as Mr. Sam, sat silently. The faint hum of the mansion generator masking the storm inside his chest. Every word, every insult, every cruel smirk from Clara Williams had painted her heart clearer than any confession ever could. But that night, fate gave him something more than suspicion. It gave him proof. He was making his evening rounds when he heard Clara's voice through the slightly open window of the guest lounge. It was sharp, panicked, desperate. "I told you I'm pregnant and it's not Desmond's. We've never even been intimate. But I can't lose him. He's my golden ticket." Ken froze mid-step, his pulse racing. He moved closer, crouching behind a flower pot as her voice continued. "I'll do it tonight. His father's stupid advice about waiting till marriage ruined everything. I'll slip something in his drink and make it happen. Once he believes we slept together, he'll have no choice but to marry me." Her friend's muffled voice came through the phone. "Good. Desperate times call for desperate tricks. Just be careful." Ken's hand trembled. His throat tightened with anger, but wisdom restrained him. He pulled out his old phone and began recording. Her words, dripping with deceit, filled the device like venom in a bottle. Moments later, Clara ended the call and disappeared into the kitchen. Ken followed quietly, staying hidden behind the curtains. He watched as she poured juice into a glass and, glancing over her shoulder, emptied a vial of white powder into it. The sight nearly broke him. A father's heart shattered, not just at the betrayal, but at the thought of his son walking blindly into the same pit that had once swallowed Linda's love. Clutching the phone, he whispered fiercely, "Not again, not this time." Minutes later, Desmond Okoro walked into the living room loosening his tie, exhausted but smiling. "Clara, you're still awake?" "Just thought you could use something to help you relax," she purred, handing him the drink. But before he could lift it, Mr. Sam stepped out from the shadows. "Wait!" Desmond turned, startled. "Sam, what's wrong?" Clara's smile faltered. "What is this old man doing here?" Ken's voice was steady, every word weighted with the truth he carried. "That drink isn't for your peace, my son, it's for your ruin." Desmond blinked in confusion, while Clara's expression darkened with fury. "You've lost your mind," she hissed. But Ken stood tall, the years of humility now cloaked in authority. "I have endured your cruelty long enough, Miss Williams. Tonight you will answer for the poison you've prepared and the lies you've lived." And as Desmond stared at him in shock, the father's disguise began to peel away, and the greatest unveiling of love and truth began. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara Williams stood frozen, the color draining from her face as Ken Okoro slowly removed his cap, revealing not a god but a father. His eyes, filled with both love and fury, burned with the strength of every prayer, every sacrifice, every heartbreak he had carried for decades. "Papa," Desmond whispered, his voice breaking. You were the god." Ken nodded. "Yes, my son, I had to see for myself to protect you from the same wound that nearly destroyed me." Clara stepped back, trembling. "You tricked me," she hissed, voice shaking. "You're both crazy." Ken raised the small phone in his hand. "No, Clara, we're not crazy, just careful." He pressed play, the room filled with her own voice, recorded clearly, her lies, her pregnancy, her plan to drug Desmond and trap him into marriage. Each word echoed like thunder through the mansion's polished walls. Clara's knees gave way. "Desmond, please. It's not what it sounds like. I was angry, desperate. I love you." Desmond's face hardened, pain flickering behind his calm. "You love my name, my wealth, not me." He turned toward his father, eyes wet. "Papa, you were right. I saw beauty and called it love." Ken placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "And I saw love disguised as pride. But truth, my son, truth always unmasks everything." Clara tried one last plea, clutching Desmond's arm. "Please don't do this." He pulled away gently but firmly. "It's over, Clara. Pack your things. You're leaving tonight." She sobbed as security escorted her out, her heels clicking away like fading echoes of vanity. When the door shut, the silence that returned was wholly heavy, cleansing. Desmond turned to his father. "I was blind, Papa. I thought love was luxury." Ken smiled softly, tiredly. "Love isn't found in chandeliers or cars, Desmond. It's in the person who will hold your umbrella while they get drenched, not the one who complains the rain ruined her hair." Tears fell freely now. Desmond hugged him tightly. "You've always been my guard, Papa, not just at the gate, but at the door of my heart." Ken chuckled through the tears. "And you've been my reward proof that a man's legacy isn't his riches, but his children's wisdom." Weeks later, in the same mansion that once echoed with deception, laughter returned lighter, purer. Anita Bassey came by to deliver reports, but this time Desmond met her at the door himself. Their eyes met, humble meeting humble, kindness meeting destiny. Outside, Ken stood by the garden, watching them with quiet joy. He looked toward the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. The test is over." As the sun dipped behind the Lekora hills, its last rays fell on the mansion's white walls, no longer a house of shadows, but a home reborn in truth.